Hey fellow nerds, in this video we are going to discuss some elementary signals including exponential signals, sinusoidal signals and unit impulse signal. Let us start with continuous time exponential signals. A general continuous time exponential signal can be mathematically written like this: x of t is equal to c e raised to a t. Let's take the first case where c and a are complex. In that case, we call this complex exponential signal. Now, if c and a are real numbers, we call it a real exponential signal. This can be of two types. If a is less than 0, we get a decaying exponential, and if a is greater than 0, we get a growing exponential. In both cases, at x equal to 0, if we try to find out x of 0, we get c e raised to whatever a may be multiplied by 0. So we get c. So x of 0 in both cases is going to have the value c like this. Let's take the first case, a less than 0. Consider a is minus 1. Then at t equals minus 1, x of minus 1 is going to be c e raised to a is also minus 1 multiplied by minus 1. So you get ce. At minus 2, you get c e raised to a is minus 1, t is minus 2. So you get c e square. Looking at the pattern, I can tell that x of minus 3 is now going to be c e cube. Obviously, it is increasing. So the graph justifiably looks like this over here. On the other side, if you try to find x of 1, we get c e raised to a is minus 1, t is 1. So we get c in inverse. X of 2 will be c e raised to minus 1 multiplied by 2. So c e raised to minus 2. Obviously, this is decreasing. So our graph looks like this over here. Similarly, you can check for a greater than 0 by giving a number for a, for example 1, and you can see this is going to be a growing exponential. Now, the third case is when a is purely imaginary. As an example, let us take x of t is e raised to j omega naught t. If you compare, you can see I've taken c as 1 and a is purely imaginary, so I've taken it as j omega naught. Now, by Euler's relation, which is a mathematical relation, e raised to j omega naught t can be written as cos of omega naught t plus j sine of omega naught t. Let's keep this in mind. Let us take this signal x of t is e raised to j omega naught t and try to find its periodicity. Let's consider capital T is its period, which means e raised to j omega naught t will be equal to e raised to j omega naught t plus the time period. But this can be written as e raised to j omega naught t multiplied by e raised to j omega naught t. We have e raised to j omega naught t here and here, both on the LHS and on the RHS. So if we cancel them, what we get is e raised to j omega naught multiplied by the time period is supposed to be equal to 1. But according to Euler's relation, what did we learn? E raised to j omega naught t is cos of omega naught t plus j sine of omega naught t. Over here we have capital T, so I'll just replace it. Now, if e raised to j omega naught t is supposed to be equal to 1, that means cos omega naught t plus j sine omega naught t is also supposed to be equal to 1. Let us acknowledge a first case that if omega naught is equal to 0, then what will be x of t? X of t is e raised to j omega naught t. If omega naught is 0, it becomes e raised to 0. So x of t is 1 in that case. X of t is 1 means the value of the function is 1 everywhere. So you could say it is periodic for any value of t. Periodic for every value of t. Now, if omega naught is not equal to 0, consider that the time period is 2n pi by omega naught. N is any integer. In that case, cos omega naught t plus j sin omega naught t will become cos omega naught t is 2n pi by omega naught plus j sin omega naught t is 2n pi by omega naught. Here omega naught and omega naught can cancel here and here. So we get cos 2n pi plus j sin 2n pi. Cos 2n pi is 1. Cos of an even multiple of pi is always 1. On the other hand, sine of an even multiple of pi is always 0. So this is 1 plus 0, which is 1. So technically what we just proved is that cos omega naught t plus j sin omega naught t is 1 if the time period is a multiple of 2 pi by omega naught. To get the fundamental period, we can take n equals 1. Let's write down fundamental period t is equal to 2 pi by omega naught. Now, what if you take e raised to minus j omega t? In that case, you can write this as cos of minus omega naught t plus j sine of minus omega naught t. Cos of minus theta is the same as cos theta. So you will get cos omega naught t. Sine of minus theta is minus sine theta. So this is minus j sine omega naught t. When time is the time period, we want this to be 1. So cos omega naught t minus j sine omega naught t should be equal to 1. Let us consider the same t that is 2n pi by omega naught, ignoring the negative sign. We will have cos omega naught 2n pi by omega naught minus j sine omega naught 2n pi by omega naught. The first term will be cos 2n pi, cancelling omega naughts, which is 1, minus j sine 2n pi, cancelling the omega naughts, we get 0. And 1 minus 0 is 1. So what we just found out here is that time period 2n pi by omega naught works here also. That is, e raised to minus j omega naught t has the same fundamental time period as e raised to j omega naught t. Let's move on to the energy and power of this continuous time complex exponential signal e raised to j omega naught t. To find the energy in an infinite interval E infinity, we have limit t tends to infinity, integral from minus t to t, x of t, its mode, square dt. That is limit t tends to infinity, integral minus t to t. Here our x of t is e raised to j omega naught t. But we have to take the modulus, that is, we have to take the magnitude of e raised to j omega naught t. We know e raised to j omega naught t is the same as cos omega naught t plus j sine omega naught t. If you have a complex number a plus jb, its magnitude is given as root of a square plus b square. So in this case, the magnitude will be root of cos square omega naught t plus sine square omega naught t. But cos square theta plus sine square theta is 1. Root of 1 is 1. So what we get is e raised to j omega naught t has magnitude equal to 1. So we can write 1 square dt here. Integral dt is just t. So this is limit t tends to infinity, t from minus t to t. So we get limit t tends to infinity to t. This is obviously infinite. Let's try to find the value of power now. For an infinite time interval, we write P infinity is limit t tends to infinity 1 by 2t integral minus t to t again mod of x of t whole square dt. So what we get is limit t tends to infinity. We have 1 by 2t. Here again mod of x of t is mod of e raised to j omega naught t, which is 1. So we get integral dt from minus t to t, that is t from minus t to t limit t tends to infinity 1 by 2t, t minus minus t is again 2t. So we get limit t tends to infinity 1. Now t being infinity doesn't have anything to do with 1. 1 is a constant. So this value is 1. So power of this signal is finite. But we have a name for any signal that has finite power and infinite energy. Yes, this is a finite power signal. Let's now move on to discrete time exponential signals. It will be defined mathematically as x of n. Let's take a general expression C alpha raised to n. In the first case, if C and alpha are both complex, we can call it a complex exponential signal. In case 2, if C and alpha are both real, we can call it a real exponential signal. In real exponential signals, if mod alpha is greater than 1, that is magnitude of alpha is greater than 1, alpha is either greater than 1 or less than minus 1. In that case, the magnitude grows exponentially. If mod alpha is less than 1, that is alpha is either less than 1 or greater than minus 1. It is between minus 1 and 1. In that case, the magnitude decays exponentially. Let us check if it is true. Over here, I have an alpha greater than 1. Let's take a value. Alpha is equal to 2. Obviously, at t equal to 0, we will get C alpha raised to 0, which is just C. That is what I have shown here. If we go to this side, we will first get C2 raised to 1. 2 because alpha is 2. Then C2 raised to 2. Then C2 raised to 3. It goes on like that. Obviously, it is exponentially increasing. So it goes on like that. And it continues towards the negative sign also. At minus 1, it is C multiplied by 2 raised to minus 1. At minus 2, it is C multiplied by 2 raised to minus 2. It is decreasing. So we can say the magnitude grows exponentially. It is true. Over here, we have an example of alpha being less than 1. It is between 0 and 1. Obviously, at 0, again we'll get C alpha raised to 0, just C. Let's see what happens over here. When t is equal to 1, before that we have to take an example. Let's say alpha is 0.5. So at t equal to 1, we get C 0.5 to the power 1. Then we get C 0.5 to the power 2. Now this is C by 2. This is C by 4. Obviously the next one I'm going to get is C by 8. That means it is going to decrease exponentially over here. We can verify on the other side also. At minus 1, I get C 0.5 to the power minus 1. 0.5 is 1 by 2 to the power minus 1 is 2. So I am getting 2C. Then at minus 1, C 0.5 to the power minus 2. So I get 4C. The next obviously is going to be 8C. So I can see it is going to increase exponentially like this towards the left. So ultimately we can say the magnitude decays exponentially. The first 2 points here have been verified. Let's see the next one. If alpha is positive, all values are of the same sign. You can see in both these cases we have taken positive values of alpha. This is alpha greater than 1. This is alpha between 0 to 1, and all the values obviously are positive. So we can confirm that all values are of the same sign. It's given over here if alpha is negative, the side of x of n alternates. Let's try to verify that statement. Here I have alpha being between -1 and 0. If alpha is between -1 and 0, I can say that mod alpha is less than 1. Right? Magnitude of alpha is less than 1. So it is this case. If magnitude of alpha is less than 1, magnitude decays exponentially. You can see the magnitude is decaying exponentially. But since here alpha is also less than 0, that is negative, according to this statement over here, the sign of x of n is alternating as well. Let us check if it is true. Obviously, at 0, we get c alpha raised to 0, c only. Here we have c. Now, at 1, what do we get? Before that, let's take an example. For alpha, it has to be between -1 and 0. So I will take alpha as minus 0.5 or -1 by 2. So at t equal to 1, I get c -1 by 2 to the power 1. So I am getting minus c by 2. At t equal to 0, I had positive c. At t equal to 1, I am getting minus c by 2. It has decreased and became negative. Now at t equals 2, I get c minus 1 by 2 squared. So now what happens is the negative will be cancelled. I get c by 4. So again it has decreased. Also the sign has changed. It is positive now. So we can confirm both statements. When magnitude of alpha is less than 1, it is decaying exponentially. And if alpha is negative, the sign is alternating. In the next case, we have alpha less than -1. That means magnitude of alpha is greater than 1, and you can see it is growing exponentially as given in the statement. Also, alpha is less than -1, so alpha is negative. So sign of x of n is alternating here also. Now we have x of n is c alpha raised to n. How about we write it in a different way? We write it c e raised to beta n. If you compare these two, you can see what we have done. We have taken alpha as e raised to beta. Then x of n will become c alpha is e raised to beta raised to n. So we get c e raised to beta n. This is an alternative way of writing a discrete times exponential signal. Now let's take this case 3 where beta is purely imaginary. As a specific example, let's take x of n is e raised to j omega naught n. This is similar to the one that we took in continuous time, e raised to j omega naught t. Here also we take c to be 1 and beta is purely imaginary. We took it as j omega naught. We can use Euler's relation here also. By Euler's relation, we can write e raised to j omega naught n. This will be equal to cos of omega naught n plus j sine of omega naught n. Just like we did before, let's try to find the periodicity of this function. Let's say it is periodic with n. In that case, e raised to j omega naught n plus n should be equal to e raised to j omega naught n. It should start repeating after capital N. But this is e raised to j omega naught n multiplied by e raised to j omega naught n, and this should be equal to e raised to j omega naught n. You can cancel these two, which gives us e raised to j omega naught n should be equal to 1. You can see this is very similar to what we did before. So by the same steps, we get if n is a multiple of 2 pi by omega naught, it could be the period of x of n. Let's put the period in a box and move on to finding the energy and power of this signal. Energy of this signal over an infinite time interval will be E infinity, and this is going to be limit n tends to infinity summation from n equals minus n to n mod of x of n whole square. Here x of n is e raised to j omega naught n. just like we did before, we can see that the magnitude of e raised to j omega naught n is also going to be 1. So we can write limit n tends to infinity summation n equals minus n to n 1 square. So this is limit n tends to infinity summation from minus n to n, you will get 2n, and according to the limit n is infinite, which means obviously the energy of this signal is infinite. Now let's try to find the power. Power across an infinite interval will be again limit n tends to infinity 1 by 2n plus 1 summation from n equals minus n to n x of n whole square after taking a magnitude. We have actually already found this part. It's going to be 2n. So without further ado, let's take it as 2n. Limit n tends to infinity 1 by 2n plus 1 multiplied by 2n. Let's divide the numerator and denominator with 2n, which gives us limit n tends to infinity 2n by 2n 1, 2n by 2n 1, then 1 by 2n. If n is a very huge number, then 1 by 2n will become 0, 1 will still be 1, 1 will still be 1. So this is actually equal to 1, which means power is finite. And when power is finite and energy is infinite for a signal, we call it finite energy signal. That's all about exponential signals. Now let's move on to sinusoidal signals. And we will start with continuous time sinusoidal signals. A general equation to define continuous time sinusoidal signals could be A cos omega naught t plus phi. A being the magnitude, omega naught being the angular frequency, t is the variable time, phi will be the initial phase. Graphically, it can be shown like this. Its maximum amplitude is A. To show the time period, I can take any one full cycle. I am taking this whole thing. So from here to here, the time period can be written t, but since omega naught is the angular frequency, t can be written as 2 pi divided by omega naught. Now, before we have learned Euler's formula, e raised to j omega t can be written as cos omega t plus j sine omega t. Let's use that here. What will be a e raised to j omega naught t plus phi? This will be a multiplied by e raised to j omega t plus phi will become cos of omega naught t plus phi plus j sine of omega naught t plus phi. Or we can write this as first term would be a cos omega naught t plus phi plus j sine omega naught t plus phi. Wait, there will be a here also. Right. Now you can see this is the real part of this complex function and this is the imaginary part. So I can write a cos omega naught t plus phi is the real part of a e raised to j omega naught t plus phi. Similarly, we can write a sine of omega naught t plus phi is the imaginary part of a e raised to j omega naught t plus phi. This would be like the opposite relation. Now, like we have done before, let's try to find out the energy of this signal. To get the energy in an infinite time interval, E infinity can be written as limit t tends to infinity, integral minus t to t. I have to take magnitude of my signal a cos omega naught t plus phi, square it dt. A square is a constant. I'll take that out of the integration. Limit t tends to infinity, a square integral from minus t to t, cos square omega naught t plus phi dt. we have to integrate cos square omega naught t plus phi. Now, when we have to integrate cos square theta, what we actually do it, we write it in terms of cos 2 theta, because we know cos 2 theta is 2 cos square theta minus 1. So cos square theta will be 1 plus cos 2 theta by 2. We do this because it's easier to integrate cos theta than cos square of theta. Here we have cos square of omega naught t plus 5. So I can write limit t tends to infinity a square minus t to t. Cos square, I'll write it as 1 plus cos 2 theta by 2, or 1 by 2 dt plus cos 2 theta by 2 dt. And theta here is omega naught t plus phi. Now we can take the integration separately. So we'll get limit t tends to infinity a square. First integration is integral from minus t to t 1 by 2 dt plus integral from minus t to t cos 2 theta by 2 dt. Take a closer look at this term. It's integration of cos 2 theta. Cos, as we know, looks like this, right? It has a positive half cycle and a negative half cycle. Again a positive, again a negative. So if you integrate the whole thing, you get the whole area. You have positive and negative equally. It will get cancelled. Integral cos theta about a period is always going to be 0. So here this part will simply be 0. All we have to find out is integral half dt, which is just half t. Our calculation becomes easier. We get limit t tends to infinity a square integral half dt is half t, or t by 2, from minus t to t. And this is limit t tends to infinity a square t to minus t, we get 2t. So 2t divided by 2, and this is limit t tends to infinity a square t. We need the value of a square t. A is just the amplitude of our signal, it is a constant. T is infinite, so this easily becomes infinite. Our signal has infinite energy in an infinite time interval. Let's go to power now. Power of a signal in an infinite time interval, P infinity, is given as limit t tends to infinity 1 by 2t integral from minus t to t magnitude of the signal a cos omega naught t plus phi squared dt. Now I'm not doing this again. We already did that integral while we were calculating the energy, and we found out it was a square t. So I will just write this is limit t tends to infinity 1 by 2t a square t. Here t and t gets cancelled. So we get limit t tends to infinity a square by 2. A is again the maximum value of your signal. It doesn't have anything to do with t. And then there is 2. So this simply becomes a square by 2. We can conclude the power of this particular signal is finite. And when a signal has finite power and infinite energy, we call it a finite power signal. Let's now move on to discrete time sinusoidal signals. A general representation can be x of n is a cos omega naught n plus phi. And I've given an example over here. We can see the envelope of this signal. This was the continuous time version of that signal. We took samples at equal intervals like this, and we got a discrete time sinusoidal signal. The maximum magnitude, as you can see, is A. And since it is repeating after n samples, n will be the fundamental period also. Let's bring in Euler's formula again. So here if I take e raised to j omega naught n plus phi, using Euler's formula, I can write this is a cos of omega naught plus phi plus j a sine of omega naught plus phi. So that means a cos of omega naught n plus phi is just the real part of a e raised to j omega naught n plus phi. Similarly, a sine of omega naught n plus phi will be the imaginary part of a e raised to j omega n plus phi. Earlier, if you remember, when we were discussing continuous time sinusoidal signals, I had shown the time period there also, and I wrote t is 2 pi by omega. Here, the number of samples after which the signal repeats, I'm calling it n. The question is, can I write n is 2 pi by omega here also, since omega naught is the angular frequency for this sequence as well? Let this be a question. We'll do some examples, then come back and finalize our decision. So let's do periodicity. First, I'll do an example. X of n is defined as cos of pi by 6n. So pi by 6 will be our omega naught here, and phi is 0. This is exactly how it will look like. The pictures are scaled. This is not a random representation. This is actually cos of pi n by 6. So you can see it repeats after these many samples. It's 0 here, it's again 0 here. Or if we start from here, 0 here, again 0 here. This particular value, again that value. This particular value, again that value. So it's actually repeating over here. If we count, we can see it like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. The 12th one is the same as the 0th one. So 12 should be n. 12 should be the period. Let's check it mathematically also. So here we get omega naught from the equation is pi by 6. So our question was, if we take 2 pi by omega naught, do we get the period? Let's check 2 pi by omega naught. It will be 2 pi by 6. Yes, we are getting 12, and 12 is n here. From the image also we got it is n. And since it is fundamental, I'll call it n naught, fundamental time period. Let's take another example. The next example I have is x of n is cos of 8 pi n by 31, or cos of 8 pi by 31 n. So here omega is 8 pi by 31, right? So I'll write omega naught first. It's 8 pi by 31. And this, as I said again, is the actual representation of cos 8 pi n by 31. This is not a random figure I drew. It actually represents x of n. So if I look at it, I can actually see the envelope. That is the continuous time sinusoidal signal from which we have created this discrete time signal. I can see that like this, right? So obviously it is a sinusoidal signal. So obviously it has a time period. Let's try to find out 2 pi by omega naught. It will be 2 pi divided by 8 pi by 31. Pi and pi gets cancelled. 2 and 8 will become 4. This is 31 by 4. Now, the thing about 31 by 4 is it is not an integer, it is a decimal. And the thing about a discrete time signal is that it only has values at integers. After 0, it has at 1, then 2, then 3. Nothing is there at 2.3 or 2.4 or 2.5, right? So, if when you say it repeats at 31.4, there is nothing at 31.4, but there is something at 0, so it is not possible. So, simply by taking 2 pi by omega naught, it did not work for us in this example. In the previous example, it did work, now it did not. This is actually an important difference between continuous time signal and discrete time signal. If you think about it, the envelope of this signal, that is the continuous time version of it, it must have repeated after 31 by 4 because it is defined everywhere, right? So, but the discrete version cannot repeat after 31 by 4 because we don't have a value there. So, where will it repeat? Let's compare with the continuous time signal. It must have repeated after 31 by 4. So, this must be its T naught. The next point where it repeats should be 2T naught, that is 31 by 2. The next point where it must have repeated must be 3D naught, that is 93 by 2. The next point must be 4T naught, which is 31. You can see the fourth one, this one is actually an integer. After this one, the discrete time signal can also repeat. So over here, the first point where x of n, which is cos of 8 pi n by 31, starts repeating will be the 31st. Now, you can disagree with me all you want because you can look at the signal over here. I have drawn it here. You can see it goes like this, right? And you can visually see that it is repeating. But let's take a closer look. It goes like this. So this has to be one full cycle. That is, after this point, it should start repeating. Let us check if it is repeating. So we have this point here, we have this point, same, okay. But the next value is this here, the next value here is not that. The third value here is this, the third value here is not that. So it is not actually repeating. Visually, you might feel like it is repeating, but actually it is not repeating. And do you know where it actually repeats? Over here. So there is one, they are the same. The second one, this much, second one, this much, they are the same. Third one is here, third one is here. Fourth one, fifth one. So it's actually repeating over here at this point. Let's see how many cycles they have covered already. 1 cycle, 2 cycle, 3 cycles, 4 cycles. 4 cycles in the continuous time version is 1 cycle in the discrete time version. And if you count these whole things, you can see this is actually the 31st term. Hence, we can conclude the fundamental period of this discrete time signal is not 31 by 4, it is 31. So what you have to do is, when you find out 2 pi by omega naught and you get a fraction, find out its least multiple, that is an integer, and that is going to be the time period, not the fraction. Let's now go to another example. What I have here is x of n is cos of n by 6. And it looks like this. It is a very beautiful pattern to look at. I'm sure you would look at this figure and tell me, yeah, it is going to repeat. It looks periodic. But let's check mathematically. If I try to find out 2 pi by omega naught, here omega naught is 1 by 6. So 2 pi divided by 1 by 6. I get 12 pi. Now, can you think of any integer that you can think of that when you multiply it with 12 pi, you get an integer? No, because pi is an irrational number. You can't multiply it with any number and make it an integer, right? So that means 2 pi by omega naught for this signal is never going to be an integer. So what we can conclude from here is that it is non-periodic. See, the envelope of this signal, the continuous time version of this signal, is very clearly periodic, but the discrete version is not. Now, we have seen so many similarities between discrete time signals and continuous time signals, and this is a huge difference between them. A continuous time signal who is periodic might have a discrete version who is not periodic. Now let's go back to something that we left. N equals 2 pi by omega naught. Is it correct? No. It could be correct. Sometimes it is correct, sometimes it is not. So to correct it, what we do is we put an m over here. M is an integer which when multiplied with 2 pi by omega naught will make it an integer. If there is no m in this world that can make your 2 pi by omega naught an integer, then that signal is considered non-periodic. So this is the equation for fundamental period. Now, like we have done before, let's try to find out the energy of this signal. Energy of a discrete time signal over an infinite interval E infinity is given as limit n tends to infinity summation from n equals minus n to n x of n, take the magnitude, square it. So here we get limit n tends to infinity summation from n equals minus n to n. X of n is a cos of omega naught n plus phi whole square. Now a is a constant. A square can be taken out. Limit n tends to infinity a square summation from n equals minus n to n cos square omega naught n plus phi. You can see how this is similar to when we found the energy of a cos omega naught t plus phi, the continuous version. So we'll do the same thing. We have to take summation of cos square, which is difficult. So we'll write it as 1 plus cos 2 theta by 2. So this becomes limit n tends to infinity, a square is there, summation from n equals minus n to n, cos square omega naught t plus phi. Using the relation that we used earlier, I am going to write 1 plus cos 2 omega naught n plus phi, the whole divided by 2. We can have two summation of 1 by 2 and then summation of cos 2 omega naught phi n plus phi by 2. When you take summation of cos, it will become 0, just like it happened in integration, because it will have exactly positive values and then negative values. So they will cancel each other, summation will become 0. So what we have is limit n tends to infinity a square summation from n equals minus n to n 1 by 2, the second term has become 0. So limit n tends to infinity a square by 2 summation from minus n to n will be 2 times n. So 2n. 2 and 2 gets cancelled. Limit n tends to infinity a square n. A square, a is just the amplitude of your signal. It's a finite constant. And n tends to infinity. So this whole thing tends to infinity. Energy of our signal is infinite. Now let's calculate power. Power for infinite interval p infinity is given as limit n tends to infinity 1 by 2n plus 1 summation from n equals minus n to n magnitude of x of n whole square. Again, I am not doing this part again because we already did it for the energy and we found out it was equal to a square n. So how about we just use it? Limit n tends to infinity 1 by 2n plus 1 multiplied by a square n. Let's divide the numerator and denominator with n. So if you divide the numerator a square n by n, it will become a square. Here if you divide by n, n and n gets cancelled. Here if you divide by n, you get 1 by n. So this becomes limit n tends to infinity a square divided by 2 plus 1 by n. Now n is a huge value, it tends to infinity. 1 by n will become 0. So this simply becomes a square by 2, which is a constant. So we can conclude power of this signal is finite. And we have a name for a signal whose power is finite and energy is infinite. Yes, it is a finite power signal. Let's now move on to the next elementary function, which is a unit impulse function. And like we always do, we'll be dealing with the continuous time version first. It is denoted by delta of t, and its definition is that It is 1 where t is equal to 0, and it is 0 wherever t is not equal to 0. That is, it exists only at 0. It is shown over here graphically. It is also called a Dirac delta function. Consider a function that is a short pulse of duration delta with unit area. I'll show you on the graph. Let's say this is a pulse and its area is equal to 1. Meanwhile, its width is delta. Now, if I want to decrease the width of this pulse but keep area 1, what should I do? Obviously, I have to increase the height. I can decrease the width, but I'll have to increase the height so that the area is still 1 unit. Now, imagine I decrease the width so much that delta now tends to be 0. That is, I decreased it, my height increased again. Now I decrease it again, height increases, decreases width, height increases. Width becomes close to 0, then height will become close to infinity. So to show that, I will put an arrow over here. And this is what we call a unit impulse function. The arrow over here shows that its height is infinite. So let's write down the properties of an impulse function. Delta of t has 0 width, infinite height, and unit area. The unit in unit impulse function comes from there. Its area is unit. Now consider you have a graph and you want to find out the area under the graph. What do? You integrate. So over here, if I want the area under the graph, all I have to do is integral from minus infinity to infinity delta of t dt. This should give me the area under the graph. But we already know the area under the graph, it is 1. So this is going to be 1. What if I take integral minus infinity to infinity a delta of t instead of delta of t? It's pretty obvious because a is a constant. You can take that outside. Again, what you have is integral minus infinity to infinity delta of t dt, which you already know is 1. So this will simply become 1. You could tell me that this is a very trivial result. You didn't have to do it because you are all very smart people. But trust me, after some time, we'll be doing some examples and learning some properties of impulse function. This knowledge will then come in handy. So what happens here is the area gets multiplied by A. What happens to the width? Nothing. Width is still 0. What happens to the height? Height is still infinite. Now, like I said, let's move on to some properties of continuous time unit impulse function. First one is time scaling. I've already given you the relation delta of AT will be 1 by mod A delta of t. Don't worry, I'll give you the proof. First, let's take the magnitude of delta of AT. We know magnitude of an impulse function is the area under the graph, and area under the graph is found by taking integration. So this will be minus infinity to infinity. I have to integrate delta of AT dt. To integrate this, first let's take AT is some tau, then A dt will be d tau. Using this, we can write this as integral from minus infinity to infinity delta of AT is tau and dt is d tau by A from here. So we get d tau divided by A. 1 by A is a constant. We can take that outside. 1 by A from integral from minus infinity to infinity delta of tau d tau. Now delta of tau is just a normal impulse function. When you integrate it, you will get 1. So the magnitude is 1 by A. To get the position, let's take delta of AT. Let's give random values to t. If I give t is minus 1, then delta of at will be delta of minus a. But we know delta of t only has value at 0. If I take a point minus a over here, you can see the value is 0. So there is nothing. If I take t equals 0, I get delta of at, t is 0, so delta of 0. And obviously there is some value for delta of t at 0, so we get something here. Again, if I give t equals 1, I'll be getting delta of a, again 0 because there is nothing at a for delta t. If this is a, there you have 0. What we can conclude from here is that the position of this graph is at t equal to 0. That is, delta of at has a magnitude 1 by a and its position is at t equal to 0. But over here I have written the result, I have taken mode of a, not just a. That's because a is the time scaling factor. We don't want it to reverse the amplitude. We have discussed the same concept while we were discussing the general case of time scaling in the previous video. So here also, instead of taking a, we will take mode of a. Therefore, the graph of delta of at will look like this. It will still be at 0 and its magnitude is 1 by mode of a. The next property is time reversal. We have to take delta of minus t. And we know what time reversal does to a signal. Whatever happens on the right side will go to left side. Whatever happens on the left side goes to the right side. But in the case of a unit impulse function, nothing happens on either sides. So if you take delta of minus t and try to plot that, you will still get an impulse at 0 and its magnitude is still going to be the original 1. Next property is time shifting, that is delta of t minus t naught or delta of t plus t naught. We know what time shifting does to a signal. T minus t naught means our signal will shift t naught units towards the right. T plus t naught means our signal will shift t naught units towards the left. To plot them on graphs, delta of t minus t naught will have an impulse over here at plus t naught. Magnitude will not change, it is still 1. For delta of t plus t naught, impulse will be at minus t naught and magnitude does not change, it is still 1. Now let's do a mixed operation. I have an example, delta of minus at plus b. So minus at corresponds to time scaling and plus b corresponds to time shifting. Is that correct? It's actually not correct. Before saying something like that, we have to write it in a standard form. So first we will write delta of, take minus a out, minus a multiplied by t minus b by a. This is the standard form. Now you can say minus a corresponds to time scaling and minus b by a corresponds to time shifting because we have t minus b by a here. Now ignore the time shifting part and look at the time scaling. So this is like delta of minus a t. And we just learned when there is time scaling, its magnitude becomes 1 by mode of whatever is the constant. Here it is minus a. So let's write 1 by a. And its position, to get the position, let's ignore the time scaling. Let's look at the time shifting. It's t minus b by a. So we'll get the position at plus b by a. Let's plot it on a graph. It will be over here at plus b by a and its magnitude will be 1 by a. The next property is the most important property of a unit impulse function and it is called sampling property. Consider we have an x of t that looks like this. Consider we are taking a delta of t, that is an impulse at t equal to 0 with area equal to 1. If we multiply them together, what will be the result? Over here we have 0, so this multiplied with this part will be 0. Over here also we have 0, that multiplied with this part, again we get 0. So the output will only have value at t equal to 0 because impulse function only has value at t equal to 0. That is, you will be multiplying x of t with delta of t. But then it only has value at t equal to 0. So all you have to do is take the value at t equal to 0. So you will get x of 0, delta of 0. But then do I really have to call it delta of 0? Because delta of t is also delta of 0. delta of t also only has value at the center at 0. So even if I call it delta of 0 or delta of t, it is the same. So I'll just call it x of 0 delta of t. Now we learned something before which we called trivial, that if we have something like a delta of t, then its magnitude will be a instead of 1. So over here what we have is x of 0 delta of t. X of 0 is a constant just like a. So here the magnitude is going to be x of 0. So finally we get an impulse at 0 and its area is going to be x of 0, or we can say the magnitude is going to be x of 0. Let's write this mathematically. So I can write x of t multiplied by delta of t. This is going to be x of 0 delta of t in case t is equal to 0. And it is going to be 0 when t is not equal to 0. Now imagine that I don't want the sample at t equal to 0. I want the sample at some other point t is equal to t naught. All you have to do is, instead of taking delta of t, you take delta of t minus t naught, where the impulse will shift t naught units. So you will have the impulse over here, and when you multiply x of t with time shifted impulse, the output will only have value at t naught. Your output is going to be at t naught and its area is going to be x of t naught. So you can say you sampled the function x of t at t naught. Mathematically, we can write it like this: x of t multiplied by delta of t minus t naught. You will get x of t naught at t naught when t is equal to t naught. Otherwise, if t is not equal to t naught, you will get 0. Again, what if I want samples at more than one point? For example, let's say I want sample here and then at some point here, then some point like this at multiple points. Let's take an example. I want a sample at every t that is a multiple of ts. As I have shown over here, I want one at ts, 2ts, 0, minus ts, and minus 2ts. All you have to do here is to take an impulse train instead of an impulse. That is, you should have an impulse at 0, 1 at ts, 1 at 2ts, then minus ts, and minus 2ts. Obviously, in the output, you will have values at all these points as shown, and they will all have magnitudes equal to the magnitude of x of t at that particular point. Now, mathematically, how do you denote an impulse train? You can see this one at 0 can be called delta of t, and this one at ts, it is impulse function shifted ts towards right. So you can call it delta of t minus ts. The next one similarly can be called delta of t minus 2ts. So it goes on like that. On the other side, the one at minus ts, it can be denoted as delta of t plus ts. The next one will be delta of t plus 2ts, and it can go on like that. This is how you mathematically denote an impulse train. Let's move on to the next property, which is integration property. Here we try to integrate from minus infinity to infinity some function x of t multiplied by a time shifted unit impulse signal. Now, we just learned that x of t multiplied by delta of t minus t naught will sample x of t at t naught. It will come at t naught and it will have a value that is equal to the magnitude of x of t at t naught. So, this will be integral minus infinity to infinity. Magnitude will be x of t naught and it will be found at t naught. So, to show that, we still have to write delta of t minus t naught dt. Now, x of t naught is the magnitude at t naught. It is a constant. We can take that outside the integration. X of t naught, integral from minus infinity to infinity, delta of t minus t naught dt. What is delta of t minus t naught? It is delta of t shifted a little bit towards right. That doesn't make any change to its magnitude. That doesn't make any change to the area under the graph. When you take integration from minus infinity to infinity, you are actually calculating the area under the graph, which hasn't changed at all. So that is still going to be 1. So what you get here is x of t naught multiplied by 1. That is, when you integrate from minus infinity to infinity, x of t multiplied by delta of t minus t naught, what you get is the value of x of t at t naught. Now, what if I don't want to integrate from minus infinity to infinity? Instead, I want to integrate in a time interval from t1 to t2. There are two things that can happen. To show the first case, I've taken an x of t over here. Then I've taken a time shifted impulse. And if we multiply these, obviously we'll get the result at t naught, and its magnitude is going to be magnitude of x of t at that point. For the second example, I have again taken the same x of t, a time shifted impulse delta of t plus t naught. So impulse is at minus t naught now. Multiplying, obviously we'll get the value at t naught, and magnitude will be x of t naught. You can also see that I have marked t1 and t2 in all these graphs. In the first case, t naught is between t1 and t2. In the second case, t naught is outside of t1 and t2. And we are integrating from t1 to t2. In the first case, when you integrate from t1 to t2, you'll be integrating in this interval, and integration gives you area under the graph. And what we have here is an impulse signal of magnitude x of t naught. So the value you will get here will be x of t naught. In the second case, you'll be integrating from here to here, but our impulse is outside this interval over here. So integration will gain you 0. To show this mathematically, we can write integral from t1 to t2 x of t delta of t minus t naught will give you x of t naught if t naught belongs to the interval from t1 to t2. If t naught does not belong to the interval t1 to t2, then you will get 0. Let's now solve some problems. We have to plot delta of minus 3t plus 2 and delta of t square minus 5t plus 6. The first case is obviously an example of a mixed operation. So first we have to write it in the standard form. That is delta of, take minus 3 out, t minus 2 by 3. Now minus 3 corresponds to time scaling and minus 2 by 3 corresponds to time shifting. Ignore the time shifting part. We have minus 3 for time scaling. We have already learned in that case the magnitude becomes 1 by mod A. So 1 by mod minus 3, which is 1 by 3. Similarly, we can find position. We have t minus 2 by 3 here. So its position is going to be at plus 2 by 3. To show that on the graph, we have the impulse here at plus 2 by 3 and its magnitude is 1 by 3. The next one is delta of t square minus 5t plus 6. To understand how to solve this, first let's bring back delta of t. Where do you get delta of t at? It will be at t equal to 0. Consider a time shifted version of this, delta of t minus t naught. Where will you find this? Obviously at t equals t naught. Or you can write at t minus t naught is equal to 0. Now, let's take the previous example. We had something like delta of t minus 2 by 3 there. Where do you get this at? You get this wherever t minus 2 by 3 is 0 or t is equal to 2 by 3. So the idea is you get the delta function at the values of t where whatever is inside the bracket becomes 0. So over here, to find the position, all you have to find out is the values of t for which t square minus 5t plus 6 will be equal to 0. T square minus 5t plus 6 is a quadratic equation. It can be factorized as t minus 2 into t minus 3. So this will be 0 at t equal to 2 and at t equal to 3. So the same function can be written like this: delta of t minus 2 plus delta of t minus 3. Since whatever is inside the bracket will be 0 at 2 and 3, the impulse will be found at 2 and 3. So we can simply write it as delta of t minus 2 plus delta of t minus 3. To show that on the graph, we will have 1 at 2 and 1 at 3. Let us solve some more problems. The first one is we have to take the product of delta of t minus 2 and delta of t. We know delta of t minus 2 is time shifted, so it will come at plus 2. Delta of t will come at 0. When you multiply them, whatever value we have at 2 will be multiplied with 0, and whatever value we have at 0 here will be multiplied with 0. So the result is going to be 0. Next question is e raised to minus 2t delta of minus 2t plus 1. First of all, we have to write this in the standard form. That is e raised to minus 2t delta of, take minus 2 out, minus 2 into t minus 1 by 2. Since we have t minus 1 by 2 here, we can write down the position first. We'll find the signal at t equals 1 by 2. Now we have to find out the magnitude as well. For that, first consider this e raised to minus 2t to be some x of t and ignore whatever else we have. So we have learned earlier, if we multiply some x of t with some delta of t minus t naught, what you actually get is the value of x of t at t naught. Here our x of t is e raised to minus 2t and our t naught is half. So for magnitude, we will get e raised to minus 2t at 1 by 2, that is e raised to minus 2 multiplied by 1 by 2. Now this is not all. Our function also has a time scaling happening, that is minus 2. And we know delta of at will have a magnitude 1 by mod a. So we have to include that as well. This will be multiplied with 1 by modulus of minus 2, that is e raised to minus 1 by 2. To show this on a graph, we will have something at t equals 1 by 2 with magnitude e raised to minus 1 divided by 2. Now that we are done with continuous time unit impulse signal, let's just move on to discrete time unit impulse signal. It is denoted as delta of n with square brackets. It is also defined similar to continuous time impulse function. It will be 1 if n is equal to 0 and it will be 0 if n is not equal to 0. You can see the graphical representation as well. Let's learn some of its properties. First one is time shifting. Obviously, if you take delta of n minus k, you will get the signal shifted k units towards the right. And if you take delta of n plus k, you will get the signal shifted k units towards the left. So it will be at minus k. Now, what if you apply time scaling to delta of n? The thing is, time scaling does not actually apply to delta of n. Let me prove it to you. So, we already defined delta of n. It will be 1 if n is equal to 0. It will be 0 if n is not equal to 0. Let us say we have delta of 2n as an example. At n is equal to 0, you will get delta of 2 into 0, 0. So, you will have 1. At n equal to 0, if you give any other value, for example, let's say you took n equals to 1, you will get delta of 2. But at 2, impulse function doesn't have anything, so you will get 0. So whatever other value you give, you will get 0. So 0 at n not equal to 0. So what we just proved is that its position is still at n equal to 0. How about the magnitude? If you remember, in continuous time unit impulse function, when we applied time scaling, the position did not change, but the magnitude became 1 by mod of a. Here, even that will not happen because we are not integrating or anything. There, if you remember the proof, 1 by mod a came from integrating delta of at. Here, we are not doing it because its magnitude is fixed to be 1. So, delta of n and delta of 2n will be exactly the same. So, time scaling doesn't really apply any change to delta of n. The next property is sampling property. Let us say I have a function x of n as shown over here, and I want to sample it at n equal to 0. What I will do is I'll take a delta of n which only has value at 0, then I will take the product, and then the product will have value at 0, and its magnitude is going to be the magnitude of the original function x of n at that point as shown over here in the graph. To write it mathematically, if I take x of n multiplied with delta of n, I will get x of 0 delta of n if n is equal to 0, and I will get 0 if n is not equal to 0. Now, what if I don't want to sample at n equal to 0? I want to sample at some other point n equals n naught. We have seen this before. All I have to do is time shift my impulse signal. I'll take delta of n minus n naught or n plus n naught, so my signal comes at a different position where I want the sample. Here it is over here. When I multiply, since all these values are 0, the product over there is also going to be 0. Only value we get will be at n naught, and its magnitude is going to be value of x of n at that point, x of n0. Mathematically, we'll write it like this: x of n multiplied by delta of n minus n naught will be equal to x of 0 at n naught if n is equal to n naught, or we'll get 0. The next property that is analogous to integration here is summation. According to this property, any discrete time signal can be represented as a sum of scaled and shifted impulse functions. That is, mathematically, x of n can be written as summation from k equals minus infinity to infinity x of k delta of n minus k. To understand this better, let us expand this. So it starts from minus infinity. Let's start from minus 2, k equals minus 2. So x of minus 2 delta of n minus minus 2, so n plus 2. The next will be minus 1. So x of minus 1 delta of n minus minus 1, so plus 1. Next will be x of 0 delta of n minus 0 delta of n. Next, let's give k equals 1. So x of 1 delta of n minus 1. It goes on like that. So let's see what is happening here. Delta of n plus 2 means this is going to appear at minus 2. And what appears at minus 2? X of minus 2. That's exactly what we want at minus 2. Over here, x of minus 1 appears as minus 1. X of 0 appears at 0. X of 1 appears at 1. So simply by writing like this, what we mean is we have all the terms of x of n wherever we want them to be. So this is a mathematical representation of a discrete time signal. Let us solve some problems now. First, we have to plot 2 delta of n minus 1 minus delta of n plus 2. Delta of n minus 1 obviously is going to be at plus 1. Over here, its magnitude is 2. So I will get something like this. The next part is minus delta of n plus 2. Delta of n plus 2 will come at minus 2, and its value is negative. It is minus 1. So it will be something like this. The next question is summation from k equals minus infinity to infinity delta of n minus 3k. Giving different values to k, let's start from minus 2. If I give minus 2, it will be n minus minus 2 into 3, n plus 6. The next one, minus 1, n minus minus 3 into 3, n plus 3. Then k equals 0, delta of n. Then I'll have delta of n minus 3, giving k equals 1, k equals 2. So it goes on like that. So basically what we get is, we have one impulse at 0, we have one impulse at minus 3, we have one at minus 6, we have one at 3, we have one at 6, and it goes on like that on both sides. So We have impulses at multiples of 3. To show it graphically, we have 1 at 0, minus 3, minus 6. Next one should be minus 9, minus 12. Over here, 3, 6, 9, 12. It goes on like that on both sides. And their magnitudes are all 1. Let us solve two more problems. First, we have e raised to minus 0.n multiplied by delta of n minus 3. Since we have n minus 3, we can write position will be at n equals 3. And we learned earlier that if you have some x of t multiplied with delta of n minus n naught, what you get is x of n naught. We learned earlier that if you have some x of we just learned that if you have some x of n, you multiply it with delta of minus n naught, what you get as a result is the value of x of n at that point, that is x of n naught. Here our x of n is e raised to minus 0.1 n naught is 3. So magnitude will be e raised to minus 0.1 multiplied by 3, that is e raised to minus 0.3. Let's show it mathematically. It will come at 3 and its magnitude is e raised to minus 0.3. The next question is the product of delta of n and delta of n plus 2. And we know delta of n only has value at 0 and delta of n plus 2 only has value at minus 1. So product is going to be 0 as well. So that's all about it. See you in the next video.